March 20th, 1944. Northern Burma. 3 miles behind enemy lines, deep in jungle so thick that noon felt like twilight. Lieutenant Colonel James Harper pressed field glasses to his eyes, watching a scene that defied everything he'd been taught about warfare. 200 yards downrange, a watermelon sat perched on a rotting log, and standing beside him, Corporal Thomas Ridley worked the bolt on the strangest-looking rifle Harper had ever seen. The weapon was grotesque. A massive steel cylinder ran nearly the full length of the barrel, bulbous, unwieldy, making the already long Lee-Enfield look like something a plumber cobbled together in a basement workshop. Major Peterson, standing to Harper's left with arms crossed, couldn't hide his contempt. "It won't work," he said flatly. "A suppressor that size destroys barrel harmonics. You'll be lucky to hit a barn door at 50 yards. Ridley chambered around, settled into firing position, exhaled slowly, squeezed. The rifle produced a sound like a man coughing once into his fist. Downrange, the watermelon exploded. Peterson's jaw went slack. Harper lowered his binoculars slowly, his mind already calculating tactical possibilities that had seemed impossible just moments before. Because for 18 brutal months, British snipers in Burma had been locked in a death spiral with their Japanese counterparts. Every shot fired revealed your position. Every position revealed became your grave. Snipers were averaging 1 kill before having to run for their lives, if they survived that long. The rifle Ridley held could change everything. "How many rounds before the suppressor fails?" Harper asked quietly. "Tested to 500 rounds, sir," Ridley replied. "Zero accuracy degradation." Harper turned to face his staff officers. The morning light filtering through jungle canopy cast shadows across faces that still showed skepticism. "Gentlemen, I want that Japanese command element eliminated within 7 days. No artillery, no air support, no conventional sniper operations." He looked at Ridley. Just him and that ridiculous rifle. What happened in the next week would force the Japanese to fundamentally alter their entire command structure in Burma. And it would make Corporal Thomas Ridley the most hunted man in the theater. By March 1944, the Burma campaign had devolved into some of the most savage jungle warfare the world had ever seen. General William Slim's 14th Army, the so-called Forgotten Army, because newspapers back home barely mentioned them, faced the Japanese 15th Army across terrain that turned conventional tactics into suicide. Visibility rarely exceeded 50 yards. Artillery was nearly impossible to position effectively. Air support couldn't penetrate the triple canopy jungle that blocked out the sun. Sniping had become the dominant form of combat, but it was killing Allied snipers faster than they could kill the enemy. The numbers were brutal and undeniable. British snipers using standard Lee-Enfield rifles, superb weapons with effective range exceeding 600 yards, were achieving an average of 1.3 confirmed kills before being killed or wounded themselves. 1 1/3 kills. Then you died. The problem was simple physics. The muzzle report from a standard 303 British cartridge echoed through the jungle like a thunderclap, revealing your position instantly. And Japanese infantry doctrine called for immediate, overwhelming response to any muzzle flash or sound. Suppressive fire followed by rapid flanking maneuvers from multiple directions. Intelligence reports from captured Japanese documents revealed their counter-sniper tactics in disturbing detail. The moment they detected Allied sniper fire, Japanese platoon leaders would deploy an entire squad, 9 men, to triangulate the sound. They didn't need to see you. They only needed to hear you once. Within 90 seconds, Type 99 light machine guns would pour 450 rounds per minute into your estimated position, while riflemen closed in from multiple directions like wolves. The casualty statistics told the story. Between December 1943 and February 1944, the 3rd Commando Brigade lost 23 trained snipers, nearly 40% of their total sniper strength. Each sniper represented months of training, years of combat experience. Each loss degraded the entire unit's effectiveness. Captain Robert Shaw of the King's Own Yorkshire Light Infantry captured the desperation in his after-action report. The Japanese own the jungle at night, but even in daylight, their counter-sniper response is so swift and coordinated that our men are essentially conducting suicide missions. Fire one shot, survive maybe 2 minutes. That's the equation. The British desperately needed a tactical advantage, something to tilt those odds back in their favor. Standard suppression technology existed, of course. The well-rod pistol, used extensively by special operations for close-range assassinations, was whisper-quiet, but pistol range was 15 yards maximum, useless for actual sniper operations where you needed distance to survive. The Delisle carbine had emerged from Station Anile, the Special Operations Executive's weapons development facility near Welwyn, back in 1942. It was an engineering marvel, a Lee-Enfield action converted to fire 45 ACP subsonic ammunition through a modified Thompson submachine gun barrel wrapped in an integral suppressor. The weapon was phenomenally quiet, measuring approximately 85 decibels, quieter than a pneumatic drill, barely louder than ambient jungle noise. But the Delisle had a fatal flaw for jungle operations. Effective range of only 100 yards, maybe 150 on a perfect day. The subsonic 45 ACP rounds simply didn't carry enough energy for longer shots. And in Burma, 100 yards often placed you inside the Japanese defensive perimeter, exactly where you didn't want to be. What the commandos needed was impossible. A weapon with sniper range and subsonic silence. Enter Corporal Thomas Ridley, .ITO. Quick question before we continue. Have you heard about suppressed weapons in World War II? Most people think suppressors are modern technology, but they go back further than you'd imagine. Drop a comment with your thoughts. And if you're enjoying this dive into forgotten innovations that changed warfare, hit that subscribe button. Your support keeps these stories alive. 28 years old, born in Sheffield, Ridley had worked in a machine shop before the war. The kind of place where you learn to solve problems with your hands, not theory. He'd studied the Delisle design and believed the principle could be adapted to standard 303 ammunition if the suppressor could handle higher pressure and the ammunition could be modified for subsonic performance. His initial proposal was rejected by 3 different ordnance officers. The mathematics didn't work, they told him. A 303 round needed 2,440 feet per second to maintain effective trajectory beyond 200 yards. Subsonic velocity was 1,000 feet per second. The ballistic drop would be catastrophic. Ridiculous. One major scrawled across the proposal. Physics doesn't negotiate. But Ridley had done something those ordnance officers hadn't. He'd actually tested the concept. In late January 1944, working in a field workshop with scavenged materials, he'd hand-machined a suppressor that could mount to a standard rifle. He'd hand-loaded 303 cartridges with reduced powder charges, bringing them down to subsonic velocities. The accuracy was terrible beyond 100 yards. But then Ridley made his breakthrough. He discovered that by adjusting his holdover to compensate for the extreme drop, and by limiting engagement range to 200 yards, the system was viable for jungle operations where engagements rarely exceeded that distance anyway. By March, he had a weapon that whispered. Now he needed to prove it could kill. Colonel Tishi Yamamoto, commanding officer of the Japanese 214th Infantry Regiment, was not a man prone to paranoia. A veteran of the China campaign with 11 years of combat experience, he'd survived Malaya, Singapore, and the vicious fighting at Kohima by maintaining strict tactical discipline. His morning intelligence briefing on March 18th reflected that discipline and confidence. Radio intercepts indicated British commando elements were operating in the sector, but aerial reconnaissance showed no large formations. Yamamoto's assessment: scattered harassment units, possibly reconnaissance teams gathering intelligence for the coming Allied offensive. Their snipers are competent but predictable, he told his staff that morning. They fire, we locate, we eliminate. The exchange ratio favors us 7-1. He had every reason for confidence. Japanese infantry tactics in Burma had been refined through 2 years of brutal combat. Their own snipers, Men like Corporal Mitsuo Fua, credited with 47 Allied kills, operated with near impunity. The British could barely move during daylight hours without drawing fire. What Yamamoto didn't know, his divisional headquarters compound had been under observation for 6 days. From a position 185 yards away, hidden in the hollow of a massive teak tree, Corporal Ridley had catalogued every officer, mapped every morning routine, identified every security gap. But one finding in Koksatsukati gap. He'd watched Major Tanaka emerge from the command bunker at 557 hours every morning to smoke a cigarette. Watched Captain Ido conduct perimeter inspections at 600 meters. Watched Yamamoto himself review reports on a portable field table at 6:45, positioned perfectly in a small clearing where radio reception was clearest. British commando doctrine had evolved out of desperation. Since conventional sniper operations had become suicide missions, Command had authorized deep insertion teams, operating behind enemy lines for extended periods, conducting surgical strikes against high-value targets. But even this doctrine assumed the sniper would fire and immediately displace. The sound of the shot would trigger Japanese response within 90 seconds. No sniper could remain in position after firing. Ridley's weapon changed that equation entirely. If the enemy couldn't hear the shot, they couldn't respond. On the morning of March 19th, Major Peterson, the officer who'd called Ridley's rifle ridiculous, sat in on the operational briefing. Even if the suppressor works as advertised, he argued, the moment the first officer drops, the entire compound goes on alert. Ridley gets maybe 2 shots before they realize they're under attack and lock down. This is a gimmick, not a tactical solution. Lieutenant Colonel Harper disagreed, but he understood Peterson's skepticism. Every tactical innovation in Burma had failed when it met enemy reality. The jungle swallowed conventional warfare whole. The weapon isn't the advantage, Harper said quietly. The silence is. The Japanese have built their entire counter-sniper doctrine around sound detection. Remove the sound and their doctrine becomes irrelevant. Peterson shook his head. Sir, with respect, you're betting Ridley's life on an untested theory. Harper looked at the map of the Japanese command compound. Red circles marked the positions of 14 confirmed officers. No, he said. I'm betting the lives of 14 Japanese officers, and if Ridley's right, this becomes the template for every commando operation for the rest of this campaign. At 430 hours on March 20th, Ridley moved into position. The first kill came at 558 hours. Major Tanaka stepped out of the command bunker precisely on schedule, a cigarette already between his lips. He paused to light it with a Zippo, a trophy taken from a dead American advisor at Changsha. The flame illuminated his face for 3 seconds. Ridley's crosshairs settled on his chest. The rifle's modified firing pin struck the reduced power primer. The 303 round, loaded to 1050 feet per second instead of the standard 2440, left the barrel with minimal report. The suppressor's baffles caught the expanding gases, channeling them through precisely machined chambers that bled off pressure. The sound was a soft cough, no louder than a man clearing his throat. Tanaka's cigarette fell from his lips. He looked down at his chest, where the 174-grain bullet had punched through his sternum. Then he collapsed forward, dead before his knees touched earth. For 40 seconds, nothing happened. 2 sentries stood 30 yards from Tanaka's body, facing outward, unaware. Then one turned, saw the fallen officer, and shouted. Ridley had already worked the bolt. The spent casing ejected with a soft metallic clink. A fresh round chambered. Chaos erupted in the compound. Japanese soldiers poured from bunkers, officers shouting orders. But they were shouting in confusion, not coordinated response. Nobody had heard a shot. They didn't know where the threat was coming from. Tanaka could have had a heart attack, could have been struck by falling debris. The human mind struggles to process death without obvious cause. Captain Ido emerged from the communications bunker at a run. He was 42 years old, a logistics officer from Nagasaki who'd never expected to die in Burma. He was trying to reach Tanaka's body when Ridley's second shot struck him in the throat. The subsonic round lacked the energy to pass completely through. It tumbled inside his neck, severing the carotid artery. Ito managed 4 steps before arterial spray painted the command tent red. Now the Japanese knew they were under attack. But from where? What direction? Officers were screaming for defensive positions, but defensive positions require knowing where the enemy is. Soldiers spun in circles, rifles raised, scanning tree lines in every direction. Ridley remained motionless. His position in the hollow teak tree was nearly invisible. The subsonic rounds produced no muzzle flash. The suppressor's exterior didn't glow hot. From the Japanese perspective, their officers were simply dying, struck down by an invisible hand. Colonel Yamamoto appeared in the entrance to his personal bunker. Ridley recognized him immediately from intelligence photos. High-value target. He settled the crosshair's center mass, compensating for the extreme ballistic drop at 185 yards. His finger began pressure on the trigger. Then Yamamoto stepped back inside the bunker. Ridley exhaled slowly. Patience. The entire operation depended on not forcing shots. The Japanese were on full alert now, but they still didn't know where he was. As long as he remained undetected, he could wait. For the next 90 minutes, the compound remained in chaos. Soldiers spread out into the jungle, searching for an enemy that wasn't there. Yamamoto remained inside his bunker, visible only in fragments through the entrance. Ridley waited, controlling his breathing, sipping water through a tube connected to a canteen in his pack, even emptying his bladder into a rubber bag without moving from position. At 817 hours, a Japanese sniper team deployed to the far side of the compound. Ridley recognized the configuration immediately. 2-man team, 1 spotter, 1 shooter. They were setting up to provide overwatch, scanning likely approach vectors. They were looking in completely the wrong direction. The sniper, a young corporal with a Type 97 rifle equipped with a 2.5x telescopic sight, settled into position behind a fallen log. His spotter lay beside him, sweeping field glasses across the western tree line. Ridley shifted his aim 30 degrees. The sniper's head filled his scope. At this range, with subsonic ammunition, a headshot was impossible. The ballistic drop would be too unpredictable. He aimed for the torso instead, compensating 14 inches high for the rainbow trajectory. The suppressed cough. The sniper's body jerked. He slumped forward over his rifle. The spotter's head snapped around. He saw his partner dead but hadn't heard the shot. His eyes went wide with terror, the expression of a man confronting something impossible. He grabbed his partner's collar, trying to drag him to cover. Ridley's 4th shot struck the spotter in the upper back as he turned. The man collapsed across his dead partner. By 900 hours, the compound was evacuating. 4 officers dead, including 2 specialists and an entire sniper team, without a single shot heard or muzzle flash observed. Whatever was killing them defied every tactical assumption the Japanese had built their doctrine upon. Over the next 6 days, Ridley became a ghost. He killed Lieutenant Hagawa on March 21st as the officer supervised construction of new bunkers. A single shot at 602 hours as morning, mist still clung to the ground. He killed Captain Sato and Lieutenant Murata on March 22nd, both within 90 seconds of each other, both believing they were safe behind newly erected defensive positions. He killed Major Kawasaki on March 23rd during a patrol inspection, the officer dying mid-sentence while berating a private for improper rifle maintenance. Each day, Ridley displaced to a new hide site, never the same tree twice, never firing more than 3 shots from any single position. He moved only at night, navigating by compass and memorized terrain features, eating cold rations, drinking jungle water treated with purification tablets. By March 26th, the Japanese 214th Regiment command structure was in complete collapse. Officers refused to conduct outdoor meetings. Radio discipline deteriorated as commanders barked panicked orders over unsecured channels. Patrols moved in tight clusters, sacrificing tactical flexibility for psychological comfort. And still, the silent deaths continued. 15 officers in 6 days. Then 18. Then 20. Colonel Yamamoto finally appeared outside his bunker on the morning of March 27. He stood in the open for exactly 11 seconds, shouting orders to subordinates who'd grown too terrified to lead. Ridley's 20th shot was his last. The subsonic 303 round crossed 198 yards in 0.6 seconds. An eternity compared to standard ballistics, and struck Yamamoto in the left lung. The colonel staggered, looked down at the blood spreading across his tunic, and fell to his knees. He was dead before medical personnel reached him. 20 officers. 7 days. 0 shots heard by the enemy. The impossible had become operational reality. The first intelligence assessment landed on Lieutenant Colonel Harper's desk, 48 hours after Yamamoto's death. The source: intercepted Japanese radio traffic and documents recovered from an abandoned forward position. The Japanese were calling it the Silent Death. Their after-action reports, normally detailed and analytical, had deteriorated into near panic. One battalion commander wrote, "Enemy possesses weapon technology unknown to Imperial forces. Recommend immediate tactical withdrawal to positions offering overhead cover and underground command facilities. Officer casualties unsustainable." British intelligence officers initially dismissed the reports as psychological warfare or elaborate deception, but signals intercepts confirmed authenticity. The Japanese truly didn't understand what was killing their officers. What made Ridley's weapon so devastatingly effective wasn't merely the suppressor. It was the tactical doctrine built around it. The Delisle carbine, for all its engineering brilliance, had been used primarily for close-range assassination work. Ridley had proven that suppressed weapons could function as strategic sniper systems. The key was understanding effective range in context. Yes, subsonic 303 ammunition couldn't reach 600 yards. But in Burmese jungle, 600-yard shots were impossible anyway. The average engagement distance in jungle combat was 140 yards. Ridley's modified rifle was optimized precisely for this reality. The ballistics were fascinating. Standard 303 British cartridges generated approximately 2,500 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. Ridley's subsonic loads generated only 960 foot-pounds, comparable to a .45 pistol round. But the heavier bullet weight and rifle platform provided sufficient accuracy and lethality at practical jungle ranges. The suppressor itself was a masterwork of field engineering. Ridley had studied the Delisle's baffle design, a series of metal discs with precisely sized ports that allowed the bullet to pass while capturing propellant gases. He'd adapted this to handle higher pressure, 303 cartridges, by increasing the suppressor's internal volume and modifying the baffle spacing. Testing after the operation revealed the weapon's sound signature measured approximately 118 decibels at the shooter's ear, comparable to a car door slamming. At 100 yards, the report was virtually inaudible beneath ambient jungle noise. The Japanese quite literally could not hear the shots that killed their officers. Perhaps most critically, the suppressor eliminated muzzle flash entirely. Standard sniper rifles produced a visible flash that could be detected even in daylight from hundreds of yards away. Ridley's weapon was optically invisible as well as acoustically silent. The tactical implications cascaded through British commando planning like dominoes falling. Within 2 weeks of Ridley's operation, Station 9 received orders to produce 50 suppressed rifle systems based on his design. Engineers refined the concept, creating a standardized suppressor that could be retrofitted to any Lee-Enfield rifle in approximately 30 minutes. By June 1944, British special operations teams throughout Burma were deploying with suppressed weapons. The tactical results were transformative. Sniper survival rates improved from 1.3 kills per sniper to 8.7 kills per sniper. Officer attrition in Japanese units facing suppressed fire increased by 340%. The Japanese never developed an effective countermeasure. Their entire tactical doctrine was built around sound-based threat detection. Remove the sound, and the system collapsed completely. Some units attempted to mandate that all officers wear identical uniforms to enlisted men, hoping to deny snipers the ability to identify high-value targets. This created such confusion in command structures that the policy was abandoned within weeks. Post-war analysis by American intelligence officers studying captured Japanese documents revealed the psychological dimension of suppressed weapons. One regimental commander wrote in his final diary entry before being killed by a British sniper, "We cannot fight an enemy we cannot hear. My men watch officers die and believe it is the work of spirits or divine judgment against the occupation. Morale is destroyed not by casualties but by the impossibility of understanding the weapon being used against us." The Delisle carbine would remain in British Special Forces inventory until the 1960s. But Ridley's innovation, proving that suppressed weapons could function at sniper ranges in jungle warfare, changed special operations doctrine for the remainder of the war and far beyond. Corporal Thomas Ridley survived the war. He was awarded the Military Medal for Gallantry in March 1944, though the citation was intentionally vague, referencing only exceptional skill and initiative in disrupting enemy command structures during operations behind enemy lines. The true nature of his achievement remained classified until 1968. The immediate tactical impact was measurable. The Japanese 214th Regiment withdrew from its forward positions on March 29, 1944, abandoning a strategic valley that British forces occupied without resistance. Intelligence estimates suggested the withdrawal prevented approximately 200 Allied casualties that would have occurred during a conventional assault. But the broader impact extended far beyond one operation. By proving suppressed weapons could function as strategic sniper systems, Ridley had opened an entirely new dimension of special operations warfare. Between April and August 1944, British commandos using suppressed Lee-Enfield rifles killed an estimated 340 Japanese officers throughout Burma. This represented approximately 12% of total Japanese officer strength in the theater. The cascading effect on command cohesion was devastating. Units that lost multiple officers in rapid succession often suffered complete breakdown of tactical coordination. American OSS officers observed British suppressed weapon operations in late 1944 and immediately requested similar capabilities. By 1945, American Special Operations units in the Pacific were deploying with experimental suppressed Mon carbines, though these never matched the effectiveness of the British Lee-Enfield conversions. The technology would persist long after the war ended. Modern Special Operations forces treat suppressed weapons as standard equipment rather than specialized tools. Navy SEAL teams, British SAS, and virtually every Tier 1 Special Operations unit globally deploy with suppressed rifles optimized for subsonic ammunition. The doctrinal principles Ridley demonstrated, that eliminating acoustic signature provides tactical advantage exceeding any ballistic compromise, are now fundamental to special operations training worldwide. Thomas Ridley and himself returned to Sheffield after demobilization in 1946. He worked as a machinist until retirement in 1977, rarely speaking about his wartime service. When his military medal citation was declassified and journalists finally tracked him down for interviews in 1972, he was characteristically modest. The rifle worked because the situation demanded it. He told a reporter from The Guardian, "War makes you practical. You build what you need with what you have. The Japanese had built their entire defensive system around hearing us before we could hurt them, so we stopped making noise. Simple as that." He died in 1989 at age 73. His service records, now held at the National Archives in Kew, include a handwritten note from Lieutenant Colonel Harper dated April 1944. CPL. Ridley's innovation represents the single most significant tactical advancement achieved by British forces in Burma since the campaign began. His courage under extraordinarily hazardous conditions prevented friendly casualties, numbering in the hundreds, and disrupted enemy operations throughout the sector. 20 officers, 7 days, 1 man, one impossible weapon that wasn't impossible at all. Innovation in war rarely emerges from committee decisions or laboratory experiments. It comes from soldiers who understand that survival requires breaking rules, questioning doctrine, and building solutions from desperation and scrap metal. Thomas Ridley wasn't an engineer with advanced degrees. He was a machinist with a lathe and a problem that was killing his comrades. The weapon he built violated every ordnance specification, contradicted ballistic theory, and was dismissed as ridiculous by officers who'd never had to kill silently or die loudly. But he understood something those officers didn't. Tactics must serve reality, not theory. In Burmese jungle, a rifle that could kill at 200 yards silently was infinitely superior to a rifle that could kill at 600 yards and announce your position to every enemy within a quarter mile. The Japanese had built an entire counter-sniper doctrine on a single assumption: that rifles make noise. That assumption wasn't wrong. It was incomplete. And incomplete assumptions kill. One corporal with a modified rifle dismantled the command structure of an enemy regiment in a week. He did it without artillery support, without air superiority, without technological advantage. He did it with subsonic ammunition, a hand-machined suppressor, and the patience to wait for shots that would never be heard. Sometimes the difference between victory and defeat isn't superior firepower. It's understanding which sounds matter and which sounds kill. The Japanese learned that lesson 20 officers too late. One cough, one death, one silence that changed jungle warfare forever. If this story grabbed you the way it grabbed me during research, I'd appreciate a like and subscribe. There are dozens more untold stories from World War II's forgotten theaters. Innovations born from desperation, soldiers who rewrote doctrine from the jungle floor, and silent weapons that changed modern warfare. What should I cover next? More Burma campaign innovations, other suppressed weapons of WWSOE, or the broader story of British special operations in Southeast Asia? Let me know in the comments.